All right, and here we go. Welcome to another orientation hangout. Today is what is today? May 3rd? Yeah. And we're going to be talking about the tour videos and the Nichols College lecture session that we had. And basically, you guys did the brunt of the work over the last 2 weeks. Well, it was actually 3 weeks. We postponed from last week. And it was on the 5 videos, which is 4 tour videos back to back, and then plus the Nichols College lecture, which is for a lot of people one of the, let's say, favorite lectures. For me too. It's really good to see Jacques when he was still pretty young and hard hitting, which is I guess he was 87 or something. So we're gonna go over the answers, and by that I mean really we're gonna just go through the answers that where we had some people maybe missing something, or they would have read something wrong, or didn't find maybe the reference that was there, etc., and just touch on it briefly. All the other stuff, I'm really just going to go through, and we won't really spend too much time on them. So we should be going through them quite quickly. Okay, so we're going to start off with the first one, and the questions start off with, according to the lecture, what is the closest thing to see today? And we've only had we had 2 people here for this one that couldn't find the reference. Does anybody else want to fill that one in? What's the reference in the lecture itself? What is the closest thing to democracy today that Jacques mentions in the first tour video? Anybody know offhand?
It was internet, is it?
Yeah. All right. So the reference is the internet. This is kind of a short and sweet answer. And basically you could miss it quite quickly if you don't find it in the lecture, or if you're just a little bit your attention drifts a little bit and you can miss it. So yeah, he mentions the internet is kind of the closest thing to a quote unquote democracy today, and I think it's this lecture that he says that it's an important tool to protect from the point of view of not to try not to let basically the internet be regulated, etc., etc. So yeah, so that was one, and we had I think 1 or 2 that didn't find that reference in there, which, like I said, is pretty quick to miss. Is there any questions about that? I mean, just from the point of view of what the answer is and what Jacques means, what does that make sense? Is there anything that anyone wants to add?
No, I don't get it at all.
Okay, yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, so generally what is meant by democracy today is that you have the most amount of, let's say, freedom of what you can do in a certain area, which of course is never really completely free. From that point of view, there's always limitations, if not by law, then by society, etc., etc. But just from the point of view of trying to have the ability to have many points of view in one place, the internet kind of provides that. So generally, a lot of countries only have 2 political parties, or they're dominated by a theocracy or whatever it is. The internet as a whole generally, has a wide range of different points of view on different topics, etc. So we have the possibility to if you have access to the internet, you have the possibility to kind of access all this information if you know where to get it. And again, if it's not regulated by by the state, or just kind of closed down like it is in some places, like North Korea and probably other places in the world. But for us, it is kind of that quote unquote freedom to find any kind of information out there. So that's what is meant here by the connection of why that would be kind of the closest thing to a democracy. And from a practical point of view, it means that if you back in the 40s and 50s, it was very hard to get to a lot of people if you didn't get on a television show or on a radio show or whatnot, because that was the only way to get to a mass of people. Whereas today, everybody in their home has basically a platform where you can start doing things and reaching people that you couldn't reach before. So from that point of view as well, it's a tool that to some degree levels the playing field, and then also at the same time gives you at least the option of accessing information that was very hard to get back in the day, when you had to go to a library, and maybe even a specialized technical library, etc., if you wanted to find certain things. Whereas today, you just flip out your phone and find whatever you want, pretty much. That has its downsides, of course, too, because there's a lot of misinformation, etc. But that's kind of the problem of today's democracies, anyway. Yeah, so that's the point for this one here. Does that clear things up, or is there another follow-up?
No, that's clear.
Okay. All right. So then there's then we have a few here that I don't really have anything to add. Giving 3 examples that support the statement all governments are corrupt. This was pretty much easy for you guys to do, even if you didn't reference anything from the video. Next one, 5 examples that highlight the inadequacies of today's language. Again, not too hard to do. Not everybody listed 5, but it's not the end of the world. All of these were good. Which examples of languages that are not subject to interpretations are mentioned in the video? This was pretty much clean and clear too. Mathematics, chemistry, different engineering languages, etc. Next one, what does Jacques mean when he says there are no good or bad people? This was pretty easy for you guys too, everybody. Got that, no problem. Explaining what Jacques means by the phrase "nothing ever begins." This was also good across the board. Nobody had any problems with that. What is creativity? That one that you didn't have a problem with either, just directly taking from the lecture, and I think you probably have heard it a lot of times before in many of different Jacques videos, taking known elements and putting them together in unique ways. That one, and then the last one I think that we have here, yeah. We often use the expression "sunny day in May," and the question is, what is the meaning behind this expression? So maybe just again, this one, if you kind of missed it, I wanted to try and clear it up. So somebody wrote, going about without knowing your surroundings, or being ignorant of your surroundings. So which I kind of understand where the connection comes from, but that's really not what is meant by that expression. Specifically, that expression goes is derived from Jacques' examples about how a lot of the books that he's read you know, they have a lot of sunny day in May, and the reference is from the first kind of book that he wanted to read, which is how, you know, the Orville brothers managed to get the first flying machine off the ground. And the book starts with, it was a sunny day in May, and, you know, Mrs. or, you know, Wright was hanging clothes on the line or something like that. So he just uses that sunny day in May start of the book as an example of how a whole bunch of stuff written in the books are just nothing to do with the topic, you know. So his attitude was, how does this tell me, you know, how you you know, how you created a flying machine? It has no relevance whatsoever. So you know, so that's pretty much it. It's kind of the superfluous information that is put into books or articles that that don't have any reference or doesn't, let's say, doesn't use any kind of examples, let's say, to explain a mechanism or something like that. So, and also this is kind of an you know, a Jacques Fresco unique thing. It's not really an expression, so it's you know, it's pretty it's pretty uncommon for anybody to say that. So so yeah, if you haven't heard it in this video and what he means by that, then it's very hard to have a reference for that expression. Okay, so so that's pretty much the first one. There wasn't much to add to anything here. All right. So we're going to next one. Oh, and we have Matan joined us. Hello. Can you? Hi. So before we go on, I wanted to ask you: did you have a problem with filling these quizzes out? Because I have not received any of your responses for these.
I think that was fine. I mean, I wrote the answers, but I'd like
no,
to
not
more.
No. I have everything from you, Elad, but from Matan.
Oh, I see. But today is another sunny day of May.
No, I haven't. No, I have no problem. But if it wasn't sent to you, so I'll send it again.
Yeah, no, there's none of them came through for you. So not individually or in the spreadsheet that collects everything. I didn't get anything, unfortunately.
Maybe it's offline. Okay, I'll check it later and I'll send you.
Yeah. So yeah, because the way that the way, just so that you guys know, I guess for your own maybe use in the future, the way that the Google's forms work is that the form you fill out in the quiz, and you know, structure the questions and answers and whatnot, and you can do multiple choice too and different things if you want. But what happens is when you hit submit, then for us it shows in many different ways. So it shows like a separate entry, so I can check all the entries person by person, and then it also has a summary of all the answers. So for the whole group, not just for you 5 guys, but for everybody we've had so far. So you can get, you know, statistics of how many people filled out this way, that way, what were the answers, etc. And then also it creates a spreadsheet that you can click on, and it takes you to a spreadsheet of all the questions on top, and then all the columns for all the entries that we have so far. And so that way, you can easily kind of go through all of them to see. And there was no entry, not as a separate entry for you or in the group entry. So yeah, so that didn't come through. But just so that you know, we're going to go over all of these, and then for whichever things that need to be added or whatnot. You can send it later, and then we'll see. If it's not necessary, then we won't do another session. If it's necessary, then maybe we'll get together for another 10-15 minutes. Anyway, so let's go to the second one. So the second video that we have, so tour number 2. The first one here is how are things invented is the first one, and all the answers are pretty clear. There's a couple of them here that were pretty, let's say, short. So just to be sure, by the influence of other things. So that's pretty brief. One of the answers here was let's say a little bit of a longer sentence that I felt was kind of well-rounded and appropriate. Usually, so things are invented usually by a slow and gradual process involving many people who encounter certain phenomena and then found a way to use them and then shape them, and as they go, it gets built upon other things. Somebody said that there is no way to invent things, so that's also one of the options, meaning that things don't come out of nothing and just get invented. And then explanation of that is basically what I said before. So that both of those are good are good answers. Just if the answer is kind of too brief with some of these questions, I like to just elaborate a little bit so that we know what we're talking about. Then the next question is, what does no one can think of anything outside of their frame of reference mean? This was pretty clean and clear for everybody here. No problems. Next one after that is, what does man can think or reason mean? Again, you guys didn't have any problems with that one. Next one was, why are personal opinions dangerous? This one also you guys didn't have any problems. Somebody stated basically that the opinions are not facts, which is true, maybe a little brief. Again, holding back society from the point of view maybe that when people give their own opinion on a subject, they don't necessarily have information about that subject, so it gives kind of opportunity for ignorance to flourish, which I think was a pretty good answer that somebody wrote here, maybe just to add to that pretty brief answer that we had before. But all of these are good. The next one that we have here talked briefly about 3 of the things that Jacques learned when he was on the island of Tuamotu. I think everybody got all these right, and you guys had different ones. I think you've probably heard this story a couple of times before already, so this wasn't too hard. Not much that I have to add there. What helps us to not get angry with people? This one you didn't have any problems at all. And then next one, according to what he says in this video, comment briefly on Jacques' view on metaphysics and religion. Again, you didn't have much problem here either. So, is there anything that one of the things that maybe in this last one, just because of I guess in English this was maybe not expressed the best way. So my interpretation of what is written is that it's accurate, but I just wanted to make sure that the person that wrote this is actually means what I interpreted. So Ela, this was from you. You say that no such thing as magic exists. Things that go against natural laws don't exist. So yeah, And then you have, I'll add to that, if you observe closely, measure, and inquire, you'll find the mechanisms or the exception to our current natural law of physics. So what I interpreted here is that if you find a mechanism maybe that hasn't been identified yet, then you kind of extend the definition of certain laws of physics to include things that have been newly observed. Is that my correct interpretation of what you wrote?
I'm not sure I got it. If you can, please repeat.
Yeah, so from what you said, just this last part, if you observe closely, measure and inquire, you'll find the mechanism or the exception to our current natural law of physics. So that meaning that there might be something that you observe that is a mechanism that we haven't yet observed, and therefore it adds to, let's say, the current definitions, so that we expand those definitions to include what you've observed. Is that the right interpretation?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Just wanted to make sure with that, because the way that it was worded, I just wanted to double check. Okay, so that's 2, and then we go to number 3. Now, at this point, I just wanted to say that for Rick, some of the answers, especially from, let's say, 3, 4, 3 and 4, these 2 quizzes, the mostly, you've had quite a few where you either left them blank or they were, let's say, extremely brief. So this, you'll have to add some things to this, but I don't think that we are going to do that here in the session itself. But after we finish, I'll let you know exactly which ones are they, and then you can do it as a follow-up, so that we won't do it right here for the group, because there's quite a few of them. But just so that you know, and maybe we'll spend a few minutes at the end when we finish. All right, some of the questions that we had here. What did Jacques learn from his grandfather about patriotism? A few things have been your words. This was not a problem for you guys. Everybody got that pretty clear. I'm sure that you've heard that particular story before. And then next one was, how did Jacques' background lead him to redesign society, and some of the ideas where he got them? You didn't have much problems with that either. Some pretty good answers there, and pretty long ones that included a lot. Next one, how can ego hold people back, according to the experience that Jacques had? Again, solid answers here with long enough with a lot of information for you guys, so I don't have anything to add to your answers here. Next one, what was Jacques' findings on how to change people? Again, good answers from everybody here. I don't have much to add. You guys had everything from examples of the KKK to the Immaculate Pig and all that stuff. So really good stuff. And then the last one in this video was, does everything have a purpose? Explain and give examples to support your claim. Again, answers with good explanations, with examples from the videos, etc. So don't really have much to add here either. So we'll just go to the next one, number 4. We're flying. Let's see, where are we? Okay, this one was pretty clean and clear too. what was the reason behind changing the landscape around the research center? You guys all got that, showing that you can live in advanced technological society along with nature, not destroying it, etc. The second one also about the center, besides providing a means of crossing the water, what other purpose does the bridge serve? You guys all got that one, pretty easy. Explaining the idea of constructing buildings in dry dock, no problem for you either. What does Jacques think we should do if we want to go into space? Everybody got that one pretty easy too, uniting and going as a joint venture. Next one, why is there rebar in the concrete of the domes at the center? Again, no problem. What does Jacques suggest we do to conserve water in the bathroom? No problem with that too. You guys had, I think, I'm sure that you've seen that before. Maybe not even just with Jacques now. There's also videos from, you know, Japan and elsewhere where they're already doing things like that. One aspect of the model cars, the Jacques says gets kids interested. The magnetic collision that you guys had, that no problem either. Where would waste be recycled in Jacques cities? Under the roadways or away from the city? Yeah. And then not the last one. We got a few more here. Oopsie. Let me clean this up. Okay. What is the what is the purpose of the circular city arrangement? Some of these were a little bit short, maybe, but we're going to cover this. This is going to be a whole session on this topic. For the most part, you guys all had easier to construct, easier to get around, same distance from the city center, etc. So you pretty much got all the stuff there. So that's not a big problem. So this next one is one that we've had somewhat, let's say, that just and the question wasn't clear always to everybody. Approximately what percentage of TVP's architectural designs are permanent? And some of that, mostly everybody says none, so 0%. Somebody said 100%. I will assume that this is just because of the misunderstanding, because what is meant by the question is that basically nothing is permanent, that the things that are built should be recyclable, changeable, etc. Although they would be longer lasting. So when you say something like, you know, the designs are permanent, maybe somebody thought that it means that they're going to last longer than what we have things lasting today, which also does make sense. So I assume that that's what this was here. Some people didn't even, you know, write in as a 0%, but somebody wrote none of the above. Everything is changing, or somebody said always evolving. I don't know if that was in this group, but anyway. So I think that's I think that's pretty clear. I guess the question is kind of, we have had people before that were that just kind of read that wrong. Is this pretty clear, or does that make sense? Okay, so it was just a misunderstanding. Okay. So, okay, we got a few more in this one. Briefly describe how people will design their homes in the Venus project. Everybody wrote down that visual experience that he talks about in the simulator, so that's not a problem for you guys. What would be the main purpose of cities in the sea, especially in the beginning, to clean up and store the ocean? You got everything pretty clear about that. Machines don't have. Why does Jacques suggest that we need a cybernated government instead of people? Again, the bias, etc., all that stuff. You guys didn't have a problem with that. Next one, what is the term Jacques uses to describe living within the carrying capacity of a given environment? This was not a problem for you guys either. Dynamic equilibrium is the expression that we were looking for. Somebody wrote maintaining population. Not wrong. Just that the expression that we were looking for is dynamic equilibrium, just as a you know, as a word or an expression that you can use to try and explain. So that's one that was just as a mention here. Next one after that is how can we live within the carrying capacity of our environment? This is also, you didn't have any problems with that. Trying by measuring each region on the planet, making a survey, trying to determine the carrying capacity that way. That was not a problem. And then the last one here, what does Jacques mean when he says that nobody makes mistakes or makes a mistake? That you didn't have any problems with that. Somebody didn't put an answer down. I think that was probably by mistake because there's not a dash or anything like that. So maybe just missed the last question. That was, I think, Mark. Yeah, Mark from Israel. That's, I mean, it's not a problem. He just means that the mistakes are part of the learning process, that it's basically a method of which we test something and it doesn't work, and you know, we learn from that, and the default position is that you don't know. So when you don't know, it's highly likely that you're going to be you know, doing what generally people call mistakes. So he kind of challenges, I guess, the word itself and what it implies, which, you know, doesn't really make sense. Any questions? Or any questions regarding any of the ones that we've covered so far?
I'd like to write down the phrase you used about dynamic population. What exactly do you mean by that?
Oh, okay. So for dynamic equilibrium,
yeah.
So the question is, what is the term Jacques uses to describe living within the carrying capacity of a given environment? So that means dynamic equilibrium. One of the, I guess, one of the examples that you can use, or that's pretty easy to kind of, yeah. Or do you have a follow up? No. Okay. Yeah. So the expression itself just means that there is an equilibrium, you know, depending on how many, let's say, animals or organisms you have in a certain region, that there's an equilibrium of how much, you know, you can go over certain, you know, certain numbers before it becomes problematic. So the example is if you have a system where you have rabbits and foxes, then, you know, if you're going to have a lot of rabbits reproduce, then there's going to be a lot of foxes that are going to start reproducing because there's going to be more food for them. And then once there's a scarcity of rabbits, for example, then you're also the population of foxes is going to reduce too. So that's kind of going into the idea of a dynamic equilibrium. So so one of the things that we have to do is when we try to determine how many people we can house on Earth, is how much can the environment support without us getting to a point where we are, you know, disturbing that dynamic equilibrium to the point where there's negative consequences to it.
I have a question about this in particular.
Okay.
If you give the example with people, how would you like to determine their needs? Because if they have less needs, I mean, you can have more of them. So
yeah, Yeah.
Like,
So as far as determining what what kind of number that is for humans in particular, that's a bit trickier. That's a topic for a whole conversation, I guess. But really, it depends on it depends on the current technological development as well, and unfortunately for today, it to what degree are you applying your technological improvements? Because just having them doesn't mean that you're using them, as we can see today. So I think that we probably have a potential for carrying capacity of even more people theoretically than we have right now, but not with the way that we're managing things. So so there would have to be really surveys done, and probably studies too after after a certain period to see the negative retroactions of what we're doing. I think that we can see that by the way that we have things organized right now, you could argue that there's too many of us. but that doesn't that doesn't mean that that's kind of like a hard line of, oh no, there's too much of us here. Just because we're screwing up the environment, it doesn't mean that just because there's too much of us, it's because we're not managing ourselves according to what we could be. So this is it's very hard to talk about a certain number of people that is still within that equilibrium, and then saying, oh, a million more is going to be negative.
yeah, I see that. I'd like to ask another question. If we address this issue in the transition phase session, about how exactly would you address that and explain that to people from different cultures and different values and different access to resources?
Well, I think that we have to test it, just like I mean, with the city, that would be one of the things that we would test. There would be so many things to keep track of, really, because we would want to have as much information as we can. So, for example, if you have a city of 100,000 people, then what does that mean? How much waste do you have? How much electricity did you use? How much water did you use? How much things get recycled? How much crime you have? How much behavioral problems? How much education? How fast students are progressing? How much? All these things have to be tracked, and then I don't know, over a period of maybe 2 to 5 years, then you say, okay, 100,000 people, cities around the world, go, find information for them. And then you can compare, okay, in Brazil, 100,000 city, people city has, this much crime, this. And then we have, this. And then compared to one in Denmark and one in Russia and one in, and then you can say, okay, we're creating or making or having an influence on the environment, I don't know, 70% less than a standard city, let's say. Then that's a metric that you can work with, and then you can see, okay, how much of that influence still goes into the dynamic equilibrium of a certain area, and then you can kind of extrapolate on to find an approximate, world population that could, let's say, safely or without a lot of negative retroactions be supported on the planet currently, let's say, in a current, technological era. But then, 10 years from now, that might change to more because we find ways to have cleaner technology, have less impact on the environment, etc.
Develop new resources.
Yeah. So this is it's not really. It's one of those topics where people ask you a question, you have to give them back a lecture. it's very hard. People want to hear some kind of a number that just says, "Oh, this is how much we're shooting for. We want 5 billion. That's the maximum, no more, or I don't know, 15 or whatever." But that's not really the case, dude. It's not.
No, the explanation that drives it home. I got it. Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So, anything else about maybe this one or any of the other questions that we went through so far? Okay. And so we have just the last one left, which is the Nichols College lecture. Let me ask this before we go to the last one, because we really don't have much more. I know that some of you have been to the tour in Venus, so you pretty much heard the same thing either from Roxanne or from Jacques and Roxanne both. But for how many of you this was the first time that you went through the tour videos? Ella, was the first time? Okay. Dimitri, yeah. Okay. Is it just a little bit of feedback? Do you going from 1 to 4, you probably didn't do it in one day or in one chunk altogether in 4 hours, but do you feel since you weren't in Venus to kind of have that experience firsthand physically, do you feel that you've gotten, let's say, something that you haven't gotten before, like a better complete picture, or just the way that things were presented, or some of the examples, or do you feel that you've already kind of heard a lot of these things in different clips and you've already put them together? Maybe just some feedback with that.
Sure.
Let's just go left to right. Yeah. Okay, Elad, you can start. That's fine.
Thank you. About that added a lot of information, new information for me personally. As of course, I exposed to books and the best that money can buy, and the official and documentaries, but to see that from first hand, to see how the center and the research is built and why exactly that is that way, and a lot of the exhibitions, and especially at Video 4. That really helped me to grasp that ideas. And personally, I feel that if we use even more of these tools like models and things that we can present, that's very, very useful and help to relate to the information.
Okay. All right, that's good. Thanks. Dimitri, what about you?
For me, mainly the new information was, in this fourth lecture, which were include this all these models and structures and everything. That was something not new for me, but some of the information also was new. But in overall, it's really good impression that all the information, like I imagine if I would come to this tour, and I understand that it's supposed for the people who actually maybe never heard about this project, Venus project, or haven't heard a lot, and it's kind of compact and a short way of introduction to everything what's happening and all the ideas. So in this sense, it was great.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? I know that some of you have already been to Venus, so maybe you won't have that much feedback.
I'd like to say something.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I've been in the in the research center, and maybe I think I woke you up. I don't know. I came early.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it was the videos and the are very helpful, but there's no replacement for the real thing. For me, if there's something that the material that you see with the as one that visited the center. It's pretty much alike, but I think you can add like something like a live tour, you know, or making I forgot the word. um, a video that, you know, the user can control it and move in it. I don't remember the word, but there is this technology today. It's not that expensive, but the videos are very good. It's very helpful, but something in me. This is why I came to visit the center. This is why I came to visit the center, not only to meet Jacques, but also to see and to feel the center itself. This is something that is very missing. So you can see, it's like, you know, seeing a museum on YouTube and visiting the museum. That's for me.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, yeah, there's no replacement for the real thing as of yet.
There's an amazing thing they have done in the concentration camp in Warsaw, Germany. That they have this tour that you can actually move with the camera through the place. I think it can be an amazing add-on to the Venus project.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do like a virtual reality tour basically if you have a 360-degree camera and take it. Yeah, that would be interesting. Especially if especially now when we hopefully in the, let's say, near to mid future, we would, you know, if we would take the next step to actually have a bigger research center, then you know, then this could be done for, you know, to kind of I guess archive the old research center and have it accessible that way for people. I think that would be pretty good. Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, yeah, that's just kind of just for a little bit of feedback from you guys, because, you know, I wanted to have, like I said, this last one just to go through the Nichols College lecture here. The questions are pretty straightforward, and you guys' answers were pretty straightforward too. So there wasn't really much to discuss with this one either. So just to quickly go over it, we got 6 questions. Oops, sorry, 6 questions here. So first one is, at the start of the video, Jacques draws on a blackboard and asks what kind of memory helps people in the audience recognize the image. Everybody got that one without a problem. Associated memory. What does Jacques mean when he says that all human behavior and the reactions and values people have are all perfectly lawful? That's a similar question that we had before on the topic of behavior, so you didn't have any problems there either. 3 examples used to depict the chaos of today's system. Again, that's not hard to do. You didn't really have much problems with that. And how does Jacques define love in this lecture? This one was a little bit up and down. Not everybody I guess found the right reference, but you weren't far off either. So mostly you went along the lines of that love equals caring, and that caring is improving the way of life and solving problems and caring for people in that way. And then somebody gave the example that he puts, like stopping at the red light in your car and revving up the engine, not going anywhere. So if you just have that feeling and not transform it into anything else. And then somebody added to that, or had the addition of love is transforming all the verbal and paper proclamations to a way of life, and that's a pretty good one. And somebody's also had, so as a verbal excuse, somebody used that as a verbal excuse. So that's also a part of the answer, maybe. So all of these together, I guess, would kind of cover everything that he talks about. So that one, and then which next one is which language, quote unquote, that is mentioned in the lecture is universal and not subject to interpretation. Some of you guys just said kind of mathematics, chemistry, and physics. So basically, some of the sciences, which is, I guess, not really wrong, or the language of science, mathematics, engineering, which is kind of what he mentions in the in one of the tour videos as well. So it's kind of the same thing. But he also mentions here the blueprint. So that's kind of one of the things that was not mentioned before that's mentioned here. So that's kind of the one that we were looking for. Not everybody got that, but that's not a problem. So the blueprint is also one of the things that isn't subject to interpretation from the point of view that, the example that we usually give, that if you have a blueprint of a car, that means that if you build it here or if you build it in Japan or Russia or wherever, it should come out the same if you actually stick to the blueprint. So basically, for those maybe that didn't know or that didn't catch that, and the expression itself, the blueprint, basically is a technical schematic is what that means. A blueprint of how something comes together, gets assembled, etc. So all that together is a blueprint. It can be a technical blueprint. It can be a design blueprint, depending on what it is. But generally, it's basically, quote unquote, a map of how to put something together, or how something stands, or how something is constructed to various detail. So it can be more detailed, less detailed, depending on what is needed for that blueprint. But generally, it should not be. The more accurate that it is, the more things that it has, specifics that it has added, the less it is open to interpretation, basically. So the more accurate that you can make it, the less chance of something going wrong, quote unquote. Any questions about that? No. All right. Okay, and then the last one. What society, as Jacques came across, that had the most freedom? Again, in quotation, the Polynesian tribes that we've already mentioned before. Somebody wrote down communism. That is not the case for this example. So, and generally, we are not going to go into the discussion of whether or not you have more or less freedom in communism than anywhere else, because that's a whole different topic. But anyway, and especially since people are kind of allergic or have negative reactions to that word, I would just kind of go away from that word if possible, unless somebody brings it up and asks us about it. And there's going to be a session that we're going to touch on that at least a little bit. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. Anyway, so that's pretty much it for this one. You guys did not have much problems. Just a couple of things that I guess we stopped by a little bit for. So I don't really have much to add. I want to thank you for the feedback too regarding if you had any problems with the forms themselves. I guess that was before Matan joined us. It seems that Matan, you're the only one that has problems with these forms. If I remember correctly, you also had problems before in those forms that were before we started. So we'll try and figure out why that didn't work and didn't go through. And I mean, since you've since you've been to the tour itself before and all that, I don't think this is really going to be a big problem for you. Anyways, but yeah, but just so that we can maybe also see if there's not some kind of a software problem that that is not working for you, and maybe we can address that, I guess. Anyways, yeah. So that's pretty much for these videos. We don't really usually go much longer than this anyway. Before we wrap it up, let me see what we have coming up for next week. So now we're going back to our week to week covering of the topics. So the next one is coming on May 10th. So that one's going to be POC responsibilities and team building. So we're going to talk about that. And I don't know if Ray's already back with us for that one or not. I'll reach out to him and be sure to let you guys know whether or not he's going to be there or not. So if he is, then we're going to be having the session in TeamSpeak, just so that you know. Those of you that haven't used TeamSpeak before, we're going to try and get everybody ready to go before we start, before we actually get to next Thursday, just so that to make sure that everybody's everybody that hasn't used TeamSpeak before is up to speed, because it does take a little bit of just setting up, and that's it. There won't be. Oh, somebody just asked that. Yeah, there's nothing for you guys to go through for next session. So you got this week to kick off your shoes and put your feet up and just lay back and wait. Yeah, you can read other stuff. But there's no prep work for this one that is coming now, so it's not going to be a problem for you guys. Let me see if everybody has this here. Yeah. So it's going to be a little bit of it's going to be one of those sessions, one of the, let's say, rare sessions where it's going to be more of let's say presentation type of session, meaning that me and Ray are probably going to talk a little bit more than you guys will this time around, but hopefully you're going to have some good questions for us as we go, and we're going to try and clear some things up, and then and then from there on it's going to be mostly sessions where it's going to be discussions similarly to scientific method, human behavior that we've done so far. So it's going to be more and more participation from you than there will be presentation / quote unquote lecture type of things that we've had a few of in the beginning. So that's what's coming up. Nothing really for you guys to prepare, but who here has not used TeamSpeak yet before? Okay, a few of you guys. All right. So that's an audio-only platform. For those of you guys that are using computers, it's a free online. You can download it for free. There is also a payable version, I guess, that has some extra perks. A lot of gamers use this platform. It can take up to like 200 people in one session, but it's audio only. Although a lot of people now use Discord for gaming. Anyway, it's a free platform. I don't know about. I think that that if you have like a phone or a tablet, then I think it's like $1.99 maybe to get the app. For some reason, the app is not free. But if you download it to your computer, it's free. So So we'll try and during the week, I mean, in the next week, we'll try and get everybody to sign up that hasn't already signed up and see and test it out to see if it works. So this is something that you're going to be using in the future as we go to for one more session at least in the orientation process, and then also the monthly POC meetings are also in TeamSpeak because we can fit a lot of people there. There's no limitation to how many people we can fit. All right, that's it. If there are no more questions, especially for this topic, I'm gonna stop the recording.
All right.